The billionaire laughed when the maid's daughter sat at the chessboard, but one move from the little girl wiped the smile off his face and revealed a secret that would change everything. Just before we start, this community spans every continent. Drop your city's name if you feel comfortable sharing. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany chessboard as Marcus Whitmore, worth $3 billion at 35 years old, leaned back in his leather chair and laughed. The sound echoed through his penthouse dining room, where 17 guests sat frozen mid-bite, their forks suspended above plates of Chilean sea bass that cost $180 per serving. His target was a 7-year-old girl named Lily, standing barely 4 feet tall in a second-hand navy dress her mother had altered 3 times to fit. Her mother, Elena, stood rigid by the kitchen door, her knuckles white against the serving tray she clutched like a shield. If you've ever seen true cruelty disguised as entertainment, if you've ever watched a powerful person mock someone who couldn't fight back, then like this video and comment your city below, because this story is about to remind you that the smallest among us sometimes carry the biggest secrets. Marcus gestured broadly to his guests, hedge fund managers and society wives, who tittered nervously at their host's display. Come now, everyone deserves a chance to play in my home, even the help's children. He pronounced the word help like it tasted sour, his lips curling around it deliberately. The chess set before him was hand-carved ivory and ebony, valued at $45,000, a gift from a Saudi prince after a particularly lucrative deal. Each piece had been crafted by artisans in Morocco over the course of 14 months. The board itself was inlaid with mother-of-pearl squares that gleamed under the chandelier's light like trapped starlight. Lily had wandered into the room 20 minutes earlier, drawn by the music and laughter that filtered down to the cramped basement apartment where she and her mother lived. Elena worked 16-hour shifts in this penthouse, 6 days a week, earning $2,400 a month to clean 12,000 square feet of marble floors and crystal fixtures. Their basement room measured exactly 180 square feet, with one window that looked out at a concrete wall. But Lily never complained. She spent her days in that small space reading library books about mathematics and strategy, her mind hungry for patterns and puzzles. The girl approached the chessboard now, with the quiet confidence that unsettled adults who expected children to be loud and uncontrolled. Her dark eyes, the color of black coffee, moved across the pieces with an intensity that seemed wrong for someone her age. She pulled out the chair across from Marcus without asking permission, the wooden legs scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that made several guests wince. Elena took a half-step forward, her instinct to protect warring with her need to keep this job, this roof over their heads, this chance at something better for her daughter. Lily, sweetheart, Mr. Whitmore was just joking. Eleanor's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who had learned to swallow her pride daily. Come back to our room. Let her stay. Marcus waved his hand dismissively, reaching for his scotch that cost $85 per pour. I find this amusing. Do you even know how the pieces move, little one? Lily didn't answer. She was studying the board, her small fingers hovering over the white pawn at E2. Marcus had set up the pieces carelessly, more interested in the symbolism of the game than any actual play. He had learned chess at Andover, played casually at Harvard, and occasionally won against opponents who let him. But he had never truly studied the game, never felt its pull the way some people do. I know how they move. Lily's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried in the suddenly silent room. My grandmother taught me before she died. She said chess was the only place where a pawn could become a queen. Oh! Something flickered across Marcus's face at those words, a shadow of memory he quickly suppressed. He had heard that phrase before, spoken by a woman he had tried very hard to forget. A woman named Sarah, with dark eyes and a gift for the game that had once captivated him completely before he chose his inheritance over her heart. But that was 7 years ago, ancient history buried under layers of success and willful forgetting. Charming. Marcus's voice had lost some of its mockery, though none of his audience noticed. White moves first. Show me what your grandmother taught you. Lily moved her pawn to e4, the most common opening in chess, played billions of times across centuries. Marcus responded automatically with e5, the symmetric response, expecting nothing. But Lily's next move made him pause. She advanced her knight to f3, then followed with a bishop to c4. The Italian game, one of the oldest recorded openings. But there was something about the way her small hands moved the pieces, something almost familiar. By move 7, Marcus had stopped smiling. By move 12, he was leaning forward, his scotch forgotten and warming in his hand. By move 19, sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, despite the penthouse's carefully maintained 68-degree temperature. This child was systematically dismantling his position with a precision that bordered on surgical. Each of her moves seemed obvious only after she made it, revealing possibilities Marcus hadn't considered. Where did you learn to play like this? His voice came out rougher than intended. The guests exchanged confused glances, uncertain whether they should still be amused or concerned. I told you, my grandmother. Lily captured his knight with her bishop, leaving his king exposed. She played in tournaments before she got sick. She was going to be a grandmaster, but then she had to stop. Elena had moved closer to the table, the serving tray abandoned on a side console. Her face had gone pale beneath her olive complexion, her eyes fixed on her daughter with an expression that mixed pride with something that looked almost like fear. She knew what was coming, had known this moment would arrive eventually, had dreaded it and hoped for it in equal measure. Marcus studied the board with growing unease. The position reminded him of something, a game he had played years ago in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, against a woman who worked 3 jobs and still found time to study chess theory. Sarah had beaten him 17 times before he finally won a single game, and she had laughed and called him a quick learner, and he had fallen in love with her completely. They had dated for 2 years, planned a future together, until his father discovered the relationship and issued an ultimatum: the family fortune or the chess-playing waitress. Marcus had chosen wrong. He knew it now, had known it for years, but the knowing changed nothing. Sarah had disappeared from his life completely, and his attempts to find her later had yielded nothing. She had erased herself so thoroughly that even his private investigators came up empty. Check. Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. She had maneuvered her queen to h4, threatening his king while simultaneously attacking his remaining rook. It was a double threat, elegant and devastating, exactly the kind of move Sarah used to make. Who taught your grandmother to play? Marcus asked the question before he could stop himself, something desperate cracking through his carefully maintained composure. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Lily looked up at him for the first time, really looked, and Marcus felt his breath catch. Those eyes. He had seen those eyes before, staring at him across countless chessboards, across a pillow in a tiny Brooklyn apartment, across a crowded room when Sarah told him she was pregnant, and he said he couldn't, wouldn't, didn't want to be a father. Not then. Not with someone his family would never accept. He had given her money for an abortion and told himself it was the kindest option. He had never asked whether she went through with it. My grandmother taught herself, Lily said. From books. She could look at a chess position and see 20 moves ahead. My mother says I have the same gift. She moved her queen again, and Marcus realized with dawning horror that he was 3 moves from checkmate. But Mama doesn't like to talk about Grandma Sarah. It makes her too sad. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah. The serving tray Eleanor had abandoned earlier crashed to the floor as the woman swayed on her feet, and Marcus looked at her, really looked for the first time since he had hired her 6 months ago through an agency, barely glancing at her credentials or her face. Elena Martinez, her application had said. But now, stripped of her careful anonymity by her daughter's innocent words, he could see the truth he had been too blind, too arrogant to notice. Elena was Sarah's daughter, which meant Lily was Sarah's granddaughter, which meant no. Marcus stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward with a crash. That's not possible. She would have told me. She would have told you what? Elena's voice had transformed. Gone was the subservient maid who said, "Yes, sir," and "Of course, sir," and kept her eyes downcast. In her place stood a woman with steel in her spine and fury in her gaze. That you left her pregnant and alone. That she raised your son by herself, working double shifts until her body gave out. That Michael, your son, died in a car accident 4 years ago, leaving behind a wife and daughter with nothing but medical bills. The penthouse had gone deathly silent. 17 guests sat frozen, witnessing a drama they had never expected from an evening of champagne and canapes. Marcus Whitmore, the man who had everything, suddenly looked like someone watching his world collapse. "Michael!" He said the name like a prayer, like a curse. "I had a son named Michael?" "You had a son." Elena's voice cracked. "For 28 years, you had a son who grew up wondering why his father didn't want him, who became a chess teacher because your mother's love of the game was the only inheritance he had, who married me and gave me Lily and then died on a highway in New Jersey because a drunk driver ran a red light." Bitter tears streamed down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. "I came here to destroy you. I wanted you to see what you'd thrown away, to feel even a fraction of the pain you caused. But Lily..." She looked at her daughter, still sitting calmly at the chessboard, small fingers resting on the queen that held Marcus's king in check. "Lily wanted to meet her grandfather." Elena's voice broke completely. She said everyone deserves a second chance, even people who make terrible mistakes. She has her father's heart, too generous for her own good. Marcus sank to his knees beside the chessboard, his $3,000 suit crumpling against the floor. He had never cleaned himself. His eyes were fixed on Lily, searching her features for traces of the son he never knew, the woman he had abandoned, the life he had discarded for money he didn't need. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, pathetic, a bandage on a wound that had festered for decades. "I'm so sorry." Lily reached across the board and moved his king to the only safe square, extending the game 3 more moves. Grandma Sarah always said that sorry is just a word. What matters is what you do next. She looked at him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Your move, Mr. Whitmore." The question hung in the air as Marcus stared at the board, at the child who was somehow his granddaughter, at the woman he had wronged in ways he was only beginning to understand. 17 witnesses held their breath. Elena stood trembling by the fallen tray. And somewhere in the space between one heartbeat and the next, Marcus Whitmore realized that the most important game of his life had just begun. The silence stretched for 37 seconds before Marcus finally moved. His trembling fingers reached for his king, but instead of making the defensive play Lily had offered, he tipped the piece over gently, conceding the game. The ivory monarch rolled across the board and came to rest against Lily's queen, and the soft click of that contact seemed to echo through the penthouse like thunder. "I resign." His voice emerged as a ragged whisper. "I've been resigning from the things that matter my entire life." Several guests began gathering their belongings, sensing the evening had transformed into something deeply private. Richard Pemberton, a venture capitalist who had known Marcus since their Harvard days, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Marcus, perhaps we should give you some space. We can reschedule the quarterly discussion for..." "Stay." Marcus didn't look up from the chessboard. All of you, stay. You've watched me be cruel tonight, mocking a child for entertainment. You should see what comes next." Elena had pressed herself against the wall near the kitchen entrance, her chest heaving with shallow breaths. The serving uniform she wore suddenly felt like a costume, a disguise that had served its purpose and now lay exposed. She had spent 18 months planning this infiltration, learning to suppress her natural confidence, practicing the downcast eyes and murmured deferrals that wealthy people expected from their domestic staff. All of it, every humiliation and bitten tongue, had been building toward a confrontation she had imagined 1,000 different ways. None of her imagined scenarios had included her daughter offering Marcus Whitmore grace. "Mama!" Lily's voice cut through Eleanor's spiraling thoughts. "Mama, come sit with us." The 7-year-old had pulled over a third chair, positioning it at the corner of the chess table so it formed a triangle with the other 2 seats. It was such a simple gesture, such a childlike solution to an adult catastrophe, that Elena felt fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She had tried so hard to protect Lily from the darkness in their family history, only sharing carefully edited stories about her father and grandmother. But children see more than adults realize. They understand more than they're given credit for. Elena walked to the table on unsteady legs and lowered herself into the offered chair. Up close, she could see the devastation written across Marcus's features, the grey tinge beneath his tan, the fine tremor in his hands, the way his eyes kept darting to Lily's face as if searching for a map to guide him through this wreckage. "My husband talked about you sometimes." Elena's voice came out flat, stripped of the venom she had carried for so long. "Michael, he tried to find you when he turned 18, spent 3 months tracking down every Marcus Whitmore in the country, but by then you'd changed your last name to your mother's maiden name. Some kind of tax arrangement, he figured out later." Marcus flinched. "Whitmore was my father's name. I changed it to distance myself from him after he died. The irony isn't lost on me." Michael eventually gave up looking. Eleanor continued as if he hadn't spoken. "He decided that if you didn't want to be found, forcing a reunion would only cause more pain. He inherited Sarah's capacity for forgiveness, I think. She never spoke ill of you, even when she was dying, even when the cancer had spread everywhere and she had nothing left but the morphine and her memories. She said you were young and scared and that people deserved compassion for their weaknesses." "She was dying?" Marcus's voice cracked. "When? I tried to find her after 2019. Ovarian cancer. Michael sat with her for 43 days straight at the end, reading her chess books because the sound of his voice soothed her. Lily was only 3, but she remembers. Don't you, baby?" Lily nodded solemnly. Great-grandma smelled like lavender. She let me move the pieces on her special board, even though I was too little to know what I was doing. Daddy said she laughed for the first time in weeks when I put the knight on my head like a hat. A sound escaped Marcus that might have been a laugh or a sob, impossible to tell which. The image Lily painted was so vivid, so achingly beautiful in its ordinariness, that it illuminated everything he had missed. A daughter-in-law he never met, a granddaughter growing up without knowing her grandfather. His own mother's final days, spent with the grandson he had denied, rather than the son she had tried so hard to mold. "Why come here?" Marcus finally asked Elena. "Why work as my maid? You could have sent lawyers. You could have gone to the press. The tabloids would have paid handsomely for this story." Elena's jaw tightened. "I thought about all of those options. Believe me, after Michael died, after the medical bills took everything, after we lost the apartment and I had to move Lily into a shelter, I fantasized about destroying you, making you feel even a fraction of the loss I was drowning in." She paused, organizing her thoughts. Around them, the remaining guests had formed a loose semicircle, drawn into the drama despite their discomfort. No one seemed capable of leaving. But Lily kept asking about her grandfather. Michael had told her stories, you see. Not the real ones, sanitized versions where her grandfather was a complicated man who made mistakes but might someday come around. And she believed him. Children believe their parents. "So you got a job here?" Marcus's voice was hollow. "To watch me, to gather, what, evidence, ammunition, to understand." Elena met his gaze directly for the first time. "I needed to know if you were a monster or just a coward. Monsters don't deserve second chances. Cowards sometimes grow into better men." "And what did you conclude?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. In that silence, Lily began resetting the chess pieces, her small hands moving with practiced precision. White pieces on one side, black on the other, each one placed in its starting square with the care of a surgeon. "I concluded that you're profoundly unhappy," Eleanor finally said. "That you fill this penthouse with expensive things because you can't fill it with anything that matters. That you mock people beneath your station because looking down is easier than looking inward. That you throw parties where no one actually likes you because the alternative is sitting alone with your choices." Marcus absorbed her assessment without flinching. "You're not wrong. I also concluded that you're capable of change." Eleanor's voice softened almost imperceptibly. 3 weeks ago, when the heat in our basement room broke, you had it fixed within 2 hours. You didn't have to do that. The building super said it would take a week to get the parts, but you made calls, found the components, paid triple to have someone install them immediately. You never even mentioned it to me. You and Lily were cold. Marcus said it like the simplest thing in the world. It was February. The temperature dropped to 19 degrees that night. Exactly. You noticed. You acted. You didn't make a production of it or hold it over my head. That's not something a monster does. Lily had finished arranging the pieces. She looked up at her mother and grandfather, her expression patient beyond her years. Grandma Sarah told Daddy that chess teaches you about consequences. Every move changes the whole board, and you can't take it back. But she also said that the best players learn from their mistakes. They don't keep making the same bad moves forever. Marcus stared at the pristine board, its pieces restored to their starting positions, like a reset button for fate itself. Here was the opening again, the chance to play differently this time. He thought about all the moves he had made in his life, the calculated sacrifices, the abandoned positions, the games he had forfeited without ever knowing what he was giving up. "I don't know how to fix this." The admission cost him something visible. His shoulders sagged under its weight. "I don't know how to be a grandfather. I never even learned how to be a father. My own father was—" He stopped, shook his head. "That's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what I did." "No," Elena agreed, "nothing excuses it. But explanations aren't the same as excuses, and understanding how someone became broken isn't the same as forgiving them." "Then what is forgiveness? How do I earn it?" "You don't," Lily spoke up, her childish voice carrying the weight of inherited wisdom. "Grandma Sarah said forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you receive as a gift, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to be worthy of it." The words hit Marcus like a physical force. He remembered Sarah saying something similar, long ago in their tiny Brooklyn apartment, after he had stood her up for dinner because his father demanded his attendance at a business function. She had forgiven him easily, naturally, and he had been confused by it. "Why aren't you angry?" he had asked, and she had smiled and said, "Being angry would only hurt me. Forgiving you sets me free to decide if you're worth staying with." He hadn't been worth it in the end, but maybe, somehow, impossibly, he could be worth something now. "Another game?" Lily asked, her small hand hovering over a white pawn. "Mama says practice makes better, not perfect, just better." Marcus looked at Elena, a question in his eyes. She held his gaze for a long moment, weighing decades of pain against a few minutes of witnessed humanity. Then she nodded, a gesture so small it might have been mistaken for nothing at all. "One game," Elena said. "We can start with one game and see where it leads." Around them, the guests had begun to drift away, the evening's entertainment having transformed into something too real for casual observation. Richard Pemberton was the last to leave, pausing at the elevator with an expression that mixed confusion with something approaching respect. "I've known you for 15 years, Marcus," he said. "I don't think I've ever actually seen you before tonight." The elevator doors closed before Marcus could respond. He turned back to the chessboard where his granddaughter waited, her dark eyes patient and ancient and full of a grace he had never deserved. "White moves first," Lily reminded him, "but this time, maybe try to win. I learn more when people don't let me beat them." Marcus moved his pawn to e4, the same opening that had started everything. But this time, as Lily responded with her own pawn, he saw the board differently. Not as a battlefield to be conquered, but as a conversation to be explored, not as a game of domination, but as a dance of possibilities. They played in silence for the first several moves, Elena watching from her corner seat with an expression impossible to read. The penthouse felt different somehow, its vast spaces less empty, its expensive furnishings less meaningless. Something had shifted in the architecture of the evening. A load-bearing wall moved to create an entirely new structure. By move 15, Marcus realized he was actually trying. Not performing for an audience, not demonstrating his superiority, but genuinely engaging with the puzzle before him. And Lily, for her part, was not holding back. Her moves came faster now, more aggressive, testing his defenses with the curiosity of someone exploring a new environment. "You're better than I expected." Lily said it without arrogance, a simple observation. "Daddy would have liked playing you." The mention of Michael sent a fresh wave of grief through Marcus, grief for a son he never knew, a relationship he could never build, a history he could never rewrite. But alongside the grief, something else stirred, something that might have been hope. "Tell me about him," Marcus said. "Tell me about Michael." And there, in the penthouse he had filled with empty luxuries, surrounded by the remnants of a party that had transformed into something sacred, Marcus Whitmore began to learn about the son he had abandoned. Elena spoke haltingly at first, then with increasing warmth, sharing stories of Michael's kindness, his dedication to teaching chess to underprivileged children, his terrible singing voice that he deployed enthusiastically at every opportunity. Lily chimed in with her own memories, her father carrying her on his shoulders through Central Park, reading her stories in silly voices, teaching her to ride a bike on the same Brooklyn streets where her great-grandmother had once walked. The chess game continued throughout the storytelling, moves made almost absently, as the real conversation happened around them. By the time Marcus finally fell into checkmate, a genuine defeat this time, not a resignation, he had heard enough about Michael to understand what kind of man his son had become, the kind of man Marcus himself had never learned to be. "Checkmate." Lily announced the victory without triumph. "But you got better toward the end. The rook sacrifice on move 32 was really good." "Your father would have spotted the trap," Elena said. "He always said the best players sacrifice pieces to win positions, not to look clever." "That sounds like something Sarah would say." The words came out before Marcus could stop them, and the room went still. Elena's expression flickered. She was his mother. He was bound to sound like her. "I meant it as a compliment." Marcus met her eyes. "She was the smartest person I ever knew. I've spent 30 years surrounded by Harvard graduates and Wall Street geniuses, and none of them could see the world the way Sarah did. She understood patterns in chess, in people, in life, and I threw her away because my father told me she wasn't good enough. She knew." Elena's voice was soft as voice. "She told Michael that you loved her, but you loved approval more. She said it wasn't your fault, that your father had broken something in you that she didn't have the tools to fix." Marcus absorbed this with a stillness that seemed to envelope his entire body. Sarah had understood him better than he understood himself. She had seen his damage and loved him anyway, and when he failed her, she had refused to hate him for it. That kind of grace was its own form of brilliance, a checkmate of the soul. "I want to do better." The words felt inadequate, but they were the only ones he had. "I can't change what I did, but I can change what I do next. If you'll let me." Lily had begun setting up the pieces for another game, her movements automatic, learned through countless hours of practice. Grandma Sarah used to say that the board doesn't care about yesterday's games. It only cares about the moves you make right now. Marcus looked at the fresh position, the pieces restored to their starting squares, the possibilities infinite once again. Then he looked at Elena, whose expression had shifted from hostility to something more complex, guarded hope, perhaps, or the first tentative steps toward trust. "I know I don't deserve it," he said, "but could we start over? Not forget the past, I know that's impossible, but begin something new?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a decision made slowly, carefully, against her own instincts. "Lily needs to go to school, a proper school, one that can nurture her gifts. There's a program at the Manhattan Chess Academy, but it costs $28,000 a year, and even with scholarships—" "Done." Marcus cut her off. "Whatever she needs, whatever you need, not as an apology. I know money can't fix what I broke, but as a starting point, a first move. And you have to learn to play better." Lily's voice was stern, a tiny commander issuing orders. "It's boring when adults let me win. Daddy never let me win. He said respect means playing your best." Despite everything, the revelations, the grief, the shattered assumptions of the evening, Marcus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It took him several seconds to identify the sensation: hope. He hadn't felt hope in so long that he had forgotten what it tasted like. "I'll practice," he promised his granddaughter, "every day, and next time we play, I'll make you work for the win." Lily smiled, and for one heartbreaking instant, Marcus could see Sarah's smile superimposed over her features, the grandmother and great-grandmother reaching across generations to offer one more chance at redemption. The next morning arrived with the kind of grey, hesitant light that made Manhattan feel like a city, still deciding whether to wake up. Marcus had not slept. He had spent the hours after Eleanor and Lily returned to their basement room, sitting at his study window, staring at the chess set that now occupied his desk. The same $45,000 ivory and ebony board that had witnessed last night's destruction of everything he thought he knew about himself. At 6:47 a.m., and his phone buzzed with a message from Richard Pemberton. "Call me when you're ready to talk. What I saw last night. I think you might finally be becoming someone worth knowing." Marcus ignored the message. For the first time in decades, the opinion of his social circle felt completely irrelevant. Instead, he pulled up the Manhattan Chess Academy's website on his computer and began reading. The program Eleanor had mentioned was called the Young Masters Initiative, designed for children who showed exceptional promise. The application process was rigorous. References from current coaches, video recordings of competitive games, a written essay explaining the applicant's relationship with chess. The deadline for fall admission was in 16 days. Marcus began making calls at 8 a.m. sharp, starting with the Academy's admissions director and working his way through a network of contacts he had never thought to use for anything beyond business. By noon, he had arranged for Lily to receive an evaluation from 3 different grandmasters, secured a spot in the program pending their assessment, and donated $250,000 to the Academy's scholarship fund, with instructions that his name never be attached to the gift. "Anonymous," he told the development officer who handled his donation. "Make it anonymous, or I'll send it somewhere else." At 2:30 p.m., he took the elevator down to the basement level, a journey he had never made in the 8 years he had owned this building. The service corridors were narrower than he expected, the lighting harsh and fluorescent, the air thick with the smell of industrial cleaning supplies. Eleanor's door was marked only by a number, B7. He knocked and waited. 37 seconds passed before the door opened, Eleanor's face appearing in the gap with an expression of guarded surprise. "Mr. Whitmore." She said his name like a question. "Marcus, please." He held up a folder thick with paperwork. "I've arranged an evaluation for Lily with the Academy. 3 grandmasters will assess her potential this Saturday. If they agree she qualifies, and I have no doubt they will, she can start in the fall program. Full scholarship, plus a stipend for materials and transportation." Eleanor stared at him, then at the folder, then back at him. Behind her, Marcus could see the cramped room he had allowed to exist beneath his feet for 6 months without ever considering the people who lived there. A twin bed pushed against one wall, a folding table serving as both desk and dining surface, a hot plate balanced on a mini refrigerator. And everywhere, covering every available surface, chess books and puzzles and printed diagrams of famous games. "You did this in one morning?" Elena's voice carried disbelief. "I should have done it months ago. I should have noticed who you were, who Lily was, what was happening right under my nose." Marcus kept his voice steady with effort. "But I didn't. So I'm starting now." A small figure appeared at Elena's hip. Lily, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild halo of dark curls. She looked at Marcus with those ancient eyes, reading him the way she read chess positions, seeing moves ahead that others couldn't anticipate. "Did you practice?" she asked. Marcus blinked, momentarily derailed by the question. What? You said you would practice every day. Did you?" He thought about his sleepless night, the hours spent staring at the board, replaying their game in his mind, searching for the moves he had missed. "I went through our game from last night, move by move. I found at least 8 places where I made mistakes." "Only 8? Lily's face was perfectly serious. "I counted 12, but 8 is a good start." Despite everything, Marcus felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. "Maybe you could show me the other 4 sometime." "Maybe." Lily disappeared back into the room, returning moments later with a worn paperback book, My System by Aaron Nimzowitsch. "Start with Chapter 3. Daddy said it teaches you to think about the whole board instead of just the pieces." Marcus accepted the book with something approaching reverence. It was clearly well-loved, its spine cracked, its pages soft with handling. On the inside cover, written in faded pencil, were the words, "Property of Michael Whitmore. Do not touch Elena." "He wrote his last name as Whitmore?" Marcus's voice cracked. "He changed it when he turned 18. Elena's tone was matter-of-fact, but not unkind. "Said it was his birthright, even if you didn't want to give it to him. Sarah didn't approve, but she understood. He wanted to claim some piece of his father, even if it was just a name." Marcus clutched the book like a lifeline. A son he never knew had carried his name anyway, had wanted that connection badly enough to pursue it through legal channels, had passed that name on to his daughter before dying on a highway in New Jersey. The weight of it threatened to crush him. "The evaluation is at 10 a.m. Saturday, he managed. "I'll send a car if you'll allow it. And after, regardless of what the grandmasters decide, I'd like to take you both to lunch. There's a place in Brooklyn that Sarah used to love. I don't know if it's still there, but I thought—" He trailed off, uncertain how to finish the sentence. Elena studied him for a long moment, her expression cycling through emotions too complex to name. "We'll take the subway," she finally said. "Lily needs to learn how to navigate the city on her own, but we'll meet you at the academy. And, Marcus—" She waited until he met her eyes. "If you're doing this to make yourself feel better, don't bother. Lily doesn't need a grandfather who's working through guilt. She needs someone who's actually going to show up." "I'll show up." He said it like a vow. "Every day, for as long as you'll let me." The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparation and practice. Marcus cancelled $3, $2 million in business commitments to focus on what he had begun to think of as his real work, learning to be worthy of the family he had discarded. He hired a chess coach, a former U.S. champion named Bernard Kovac, who demanded $400 an hour and accepted no excuses. He read Nimzowitsch until his eyes ached, then watched video analyses of grandmaster games until he could follow the logic of sacrifices that had seemed like madness before. And every evening, at precisely 7 p.m., he took the elevator down to basement room B7 for a chess lesson with his granddaughter. Lily was a relentless teacher. She showed no mercy for sloppy thinking, no patience for moves made out of habit rather than calculation. When Marcus blundered, which happened frequently, she would simply stare at him with those dark, unblinking eyes until he identified his own mistake. "The knight was undefended," she would say, or, "You forgot about the diagonal." Or most cutting of all, "That's a hope move. You're hoping I won't see it." Hope is not a strategy. Elena watched these sessions from her corner of the room, rarely commenting but always present. Occasionally, Marcus caught her expression softening, particularly when Lily would offer grudging praise for a move well played. But mostly, she observed in silence, still weighing evidence, still deciding whether this transformation was real or merely another performance. Saturday arrived with brilliant sunshine that felt like a promise. Marcus met Eleanor and Lily in the lobby of the Manhattan Chess Academy at 9:47 a.m. Wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, the first time in years he had appeared in public without a suit. He carried a small gift bag containing a chess clock he had spent 2 days selecting, a DGT 2010 professional grade, recommended by 3 separate coaches as the standard for serious tournament play. "For after the evaluation," he explained, handing the bag to Lily. "Win or lose, you've earned your own clock." Lily examined the gift with the careful scrutiny she brought to everything, then nodded with apparent satisfaction. "The response time is calibrated to tournament specifications. This is a good clock." "High praise," Elena murmured, and Marcus thought he detected the faintest ghost of a smile. The evaluation took place in a bright room on the Academy's 3rd floor, with 3 grandmasters seated across from Lily at a long wooden table. Marcus and Elena were permitted to observe from chairs along the wall, though they were warned that any interference would result in immediate termination of the assessment. For the next 97 minutes, Lily played against each grandmaster in turn, while the other 2 analyzed her technique and decision-making. She won the first game against a man named Victor Belinsky, who had been ranked 7th in the world in 1998. She drew the second against Yuki Tanaka, a former women's world champion. The third game, against Samuel Okonkwo, a Nigerian grandmaster known for his aggressive tactical style, went to move 56 before Lily finally accepted defeat, but not before forcing her opponent into 3 separate time pressures that left him sweating and shaking his head in disbelief. When the session ended, the 3 grandmasters exchanged glances that Marcus couldn't interpret. Then Belinsky, the senior member of the group, turned to address him and Elena. "In 43 years of professional chess," he said slowly, "I have evaluated perhaps 2,000 children claiming exceptional talent. Most were good, some were very good. A handful were genuinely gifted." He paused, his eyes drifting to Lily, who had begun quietly resetting the pieces from her final game. "I have seen exactly 4 children who played with this kind of intuition. Bobby Fischer was one, Judith Polgar was another. Your granddaughter makes 5. Elena's hand found Marcus's forearm, her grip tight enough to leave marks. Neither of them spoke. "She will need specialized training," Belinsky continued, "not the standard curriculum. That would bore her and potentially damage her development." I will personally oversee her instruction along with Yuki and Samuel. We rarely take students as young as 7, but for talent at this level, we make exceptions. How do we proceed? Marcus's voice emerged rougher than intended. She attends classes 3 days a week, private instruction twice weekly. Tournament play as soon as she's ready, which, judging by today's performance, may be sooner than any of us anticipate. Belinsky leaned forward. But I must warn you, the chess world is demanding. It will ask everything of her. Your job, as her family, is to make sure it doesn't take everything. The word family hit Marcus with unexpected force. He looked at Elena, who met his gaze with something that might have been the beginning of acceptance. We'll be there, Elena said quietly. Both of us. After the evaluation, they walked through Central Park toward a Brooklyn-bound subway station. Lily ran ahead, chasing pigeons with a joy that seemed almost incongruous after the intensity of the morning's competition. Marcus watched her, trying to reconcile the serious chess player with the 7-year-old who laughed at fat birds waddling away from her approach. Michael used to do that, Eleanor said, following his gaze. Chase pigeons. Even when he was too old for it, when he should have been embarrassed, he said it kept him connected to the kid he used to be. He sounds like he was a good man. He was the best man I ever knew. There was no accusation in Elena's voice, just simple fact. He proposed to me at a chess tournament during a break between rounds. Got down on one knee in the middle of the playing hall with 200 people watching. I was so embarrassed I almost said no. But you didn't. How could I? He had this smile, like he already knew what I was going to say, like he had calculated all the variations and knew I loved him too much to refuse. She paused, watching Lily attempt to corner a particularly brave pigeon. Your mother had the same smile, in the photos Michael kept. She looked at the camera the way Lily looks at a chessboard, like she could see something the rest of us couldn't. Marcus absorbed this in silence. He had spent so many years trying to forget Sarah that he had lost access to his memories of her warmth, her humor, her preternatural calm in the face of his family's chaos. Elena's words were like windows opening in a room he had kept dark for too long. I want to show you something, he said, after lunch, if you're willing. Elena raised an eyebrow but didn't refuse. What? The place where Sarah and I first met. I don't know if it still exists, but I've been thinking about it all week. I want to understand who I was before I became. This. He gestured vaguely at himself, at the expensive watch on his wrist, at the casual arrogance his posture still betrayed, despite his attempts to soften it. Why does that matter? Because that's when I was happy. Actually happy, not just successful. And I keep wondering if that person is still in here somewhere, or if I killed him completely. Lily came running back, breathless and beaming. The big grey one let me get within 3 feet. That's a new record. Elena smoothed her daughter's wild hair, her expression fond and fierce. Champion chess player and pigeon whisperer, you're a girl of many talents. Grandpa Marcus, did you ever chase pigeons when you were little? The question caught him off guard. No one had called him Grandpa Marcus before. Not in 35 years of existence had he ever expected to hear those words. They felt like a key turning in a lock he hadn't known was closed. I don't remember, he admitted, but I'd like to try if you'll teach me. Lily's face lit up. You have to move slow first, so they don't notice you. Then when you get close, you run at them with your arms out like this. She demonstrated, flapping wildly. And you make a scary sound so they all fly up at once. That sounds terrifying. For the pigeons. That's the point. She grabbed his hand with her small fingers. Come on, I'll show you. And so Marcus Whitmore, billionaire, spent the next 15 minutes chasing pigeons through Central Park with his 7-year-old granddaughter, learning to move slow and then fast, to flap his arms like wings, to make sounds that sent dozens of birds scattering into the sky. When he finally collapsed on a bench, winded and laughing, Elena stood a few feet away with her phone raised, capturing a photo of the grandfather and granddaughter lying side by side on the grass, watching the birds they had disturbed circle slowly back to earth. "Evidence," Elena said when he looked at her questioningly. "For later. So we remember that this actually happened." The cafe in Brooklyn, where Marcus had met Sarah 35 years ago, was called the Knight's Gambit, a chess-themed coffee shop that had, improbably, survived gentrification, pandemic, and the relentless churn of New York real estate. The current owner, a middle-aged woman named Patience, who had bought the place in 2015, knew nothing of its history as a gathering spot for chess players who couldn't afford club fees. But the bones of the place remained. The same mismatched tables, the same wall of built-in bookshelves stuffed with worn paperbacks, the same sense of refuge from the city's noise and hurry. And there, in the corner where Marcus had once sat across from a beautiful stranger who beat him 17 times in a row, was a small brass plaque he had never noticed before. "In memory of Sarah Chen," Lily read aloud, her voice carrying across the quiet cafe, "who proved that genius has no pedigree, installed 2019 by friends who loved her." Marcus's legs gave out. He sank into the nearest chair, his eyes fixed on the plaque, his mind reeling with the implications. Sarah had been remembered here. People had loved her enough to install a permanent marker of her existence, and he had missed it. Missed her death, missed this tribute, missed everything that mattered. "She used to bring Michael here when he was little." The voice came from behind the counter. Patience had emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression curious, but not unfriendly. "Before I bought the place, I mean. The old owner told me about her, said she was the best chess player who ever walked through those doors. Said her son was almost as good. You knew them." Eleanor's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the tremor beneath it. "I met them once. Michael brought his mother here about a month before she passed. She was frail, could barely lift her coffee cup, but she insisted on sitting right there." Patience pointed to a table near the window. "She said it was where she fell in love with a foolish boy who didn't know what he was throwing away. Those were her exact words. I remember because it sounded like something out of a movie." Marcus finally found his voice. "Did she say anything else? About the boy?" Patience studied him with new interest. "She said she hoped he found what he was looking for, that the world had a way of teaching people what they needed to know, even if the lessons came too late." A pause. "You're him, aren't you? The foolish boy." "I was." Marcus met her gaze without flinching. "I'm trying to be something different now." Patience nodded slowly. "She would have liked that, I think. She seemed like someone who believed in second chances." They stayed at the Knight's Gambit for 3 hours, eating sandwiches and drinking coffee, while Lily played chess against willing opponents who had no idea they were facing a future grandmaster. Elena shared stories about Michael, about Sarah's final days, about the world Marcus had rejected and the family that had grown up in his absence. And Marcus listened, absorbing every detail like a man dying of thirst who had finally found water. By the time they left, the sun was setting over Brooklyn, painting the brownstones in shades of gold and rose. Lily had won 9 games and drawn 2, and several of her opponents had asked for her contact information, clearly hoping to learn from her before she became unreachable. "Same time next week?" Marcus asked as they waited for the subway. It wasn't really a question, more like a hope offered up to see if it would be accepted. Elena was quiet for a moment, then, "Lily has school on weekday mornings, but Saturdays are free." "Saturdays then, whatever you need." The train arrived with a roar of steel and compressed air. As they boarded, Lily slipped her hand into Marcus's and squeezed. "You're getting better," she said, "at pigeons and chess both. Daddy would be proud." Marcus didn't trust himself to speak. He simply held his granddaughter's hand as the subway carried them through the darkness under the city toward whatever came next. The following weeks established a rhythm that Marcus had never known he needed. Saturdays became sacred. He would meet Elena and Lily at the Manhattan Chess Academy, watch Lily's lessons with a mixture of pride and bewilderment, then spend the afternoon together, exploring the city, sharing meals, slowly building the scaffolding of a family. Lily's progress astonished even her coaches. Within 6 weeks, she had memorized the complete games of 12 world champions. By week 8, she was beating players twice her age in the Academy's internal tournaments. Grandmaster Belinsky, not given to hyperbole, told Marcus privately that she might be ready for her first-rated tournament by Christmas. She sees the board differently than other children, Belinsky explained during one of their conversations. Most prodigies calculate quickly. They see variations faster than their opponents. Lily does something else. She feels the position. She knows where the pieces want to go before she works out why. I've seen this only twice before in my career. Fischer and Polgar. Marcus had been reading enough chess history to recognize the names. Fischer and someone else, a young woman I evaluated in 1987. She was 17, already stronger than most professionals, but she disappeared from the chess world shortly after. I always wondered what happened to her. Something in Marcus's chest tightened. What was her name? Sarah Chen. Belinsky's expression shifted. You know her. She was Lily's great-grandmother. She was... Marcus paused, searching for words that could capture Sarah's place in his life. She was someone I should have married. Belinsky absorbed this with the calm that came from decades of chess, where every revelation could be analyzed and integrated. Then, Lily's gift makes sense. Talent like this is hereditary, though it rarely passes through generations intact. Usually it dilutes. But your granddaughter... He shook his head in wonder. She has more than talent. She has Sarah's intuition and something else, a fearlessness I haven't seen before. She plays like she has nothing to lose. Maybe she doesn't, Marcus said quietly. She's already lost her father. What could a chess game take from her that compares to that? The first-rated tournament came sooner than expected. Not Christmas, but November 15th. Exactly 43 days after Lily's evaluation. It was a local event, nothing prestigious, but the organizers had agreed to let her compete in the under-12 division despite her age. Elena fretted about the pressure. Marcus secretly hired a child psychologist to advise him on supporting young competitors. Lily herself seemed unconcerned, spending the night before the tournament reading a comic book about a girl detective. "Aren't you nervous?" Marcus asked her the morning of the event, watching her eat cereal with methodical calm. "About what?" She looked genuinely confused. "The tournament. Playing against older kids, everyone watching." Lily considered this while chewing. "Daddy said nervous means you care about something. He said the trick is to care about doing your best, not about winning or losing. If you do your best, then whatever happens is okay." Marcus felt the familiar ache of Michael's absence, the son he had never met, whose wisdom now reached him only through this remarkable child. "Your father was very smart." "I know." Lily finished her cereal and pushed the bowl away. "He was also really bad at cards. Mama always beat him at Go Fish." The tournament was held in the basement of a community center in Queens. 26 participants ranging from 7 to 11 years old, most accompanied by anxious parents who shot glances at Lily with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Word of the chess prodigy had spread through the local community, and several opponents had been studying videos of her academy games in preparation. None of it mattered. Lily won her first game in 19 moves, her second in 23, her third in a brutal attack that left her opponent, a 10-year-old boy who had been playing competitively for 4 years, near tears. By the lunch break, she was one of only 3 undefeated players, and the tournament director had quietly asked Marcus if his granddaughter would be interested in competing in the state championships. "Ask her," Marcus said. "She makes her own decisions about chess." The afternoon brought harder tests. Lily's 4th opponent was a serious girl named Priya, who played with mechanical precision, forcing the game into a drawn-out endgame that tested Lily's patience as much as her skill. Marcus watched from the spectator area, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles went white, while Eleanor stood beside him with her eyes closed, unable to watch. Move 47, move 48, move 49. The position was a fortress. Priya had built a defensive structure that seemed impenetrable, willing to draw rather than risk losing. But Lily, after nearly 4 minutes of thought, found a sequence that Marcus didn't understand until 3 moves later. A pawn sacrifice that opened a file for her rook, leading to a sudden checkmate that left even Priya nodding in reluctant admiration. The final game was against a boy named Thomas, the top seed, who had won this tournament the previous 2 years. He was 11, serious, and played with the confidence of someone who had never lost to a 7-year-old. But Thomas had never faced an opponent like Lily. The game lasted 57 moves. It was the longest of the day, drawing a crowd that included several coaches and at least one grandmaster who had come to scout for the state team. Marcus couldn't follow the complexities of the position, but he could read the body language. Thomas hunched forward, his leg bouncing nervously, while Lily sat with preternatural stillness, her eyes fixed on the board as if she could see through it to some deeper truth. Move 52 brought the turning point. Thomas played a knight move that seemed strong, aggressive, threatening. But Lily's response was devastating. She sacrificed her queen, the most powerful piece on the board, in exchange for a position that led to checkmate in 5 moves. Thomas stared at the board for nearly 2 minutes before he saw it, then extended his hand in resignation. "Incredible game," he said, and meant it. Lily shook his hand with grave formality. "Thank you for not going easy on me." The tournament director announced the results to polite applause. Lily Chen Whitmore, perfect score, youngest champion in the tournament's 18-year history. As Marcus and Elena flanked their granddaughter for the trophy photo, several parents approached with questions about coaching, about training schedules, about the chess academy, and how their own children might apply. But one conversation stood out. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes waited until the crowd dispersed before approaching Elena. "I knew Sarah," she said without preamble. 30 years ago at the Knight's Gambit. We used to play every Thursday evening. She was already pregnant then, with Michael, I think, but she never let it slow her down." Elena's expression softened. She talked about those games, said Thursday chess was the highlight of her week. She was the best of us, not just at chess, at everything, the kindest soul in a room full of competitive players. The woman's eyes drifted to Lily, who was examining her trophy with intense focus. "When I heard about Michael's accident, I tried to find his family, but everything led to dead ends. I'm glad Sarah's gift didn't die with them. It almost did." Eleanor's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the tremor beneath. "There were days when I thought about giving up. About disappearing, the way Sarah disappeared when Marcus—" She stopped, glancing at him. "I know who he is." The woman's tone carried no judgment. "Sarah mentioned him in the last years. She said he was lost but not evil. She hoped he would find his way back to who he was meant to be." Marcus stepped forward. "Did she really say that?" "After everything I did. She said that people who grow up without love have to teach themselves how to give it, and that takes time, sometimes decades." The woman reached out and patted his arm. "It looks like you're finally learning." They drove home in silence. Marcus had insisted on hiring a car for the return trip, unwilling to subject Lily's trophy to the jostling of the subway. Elena sat in the back with Lily, who had fallen asleep within minutes of settling into her seat, the trophy clutched to her chest like a stuffed animal. "She's going to be famous," Marcus said quietly, watching them in the rearview mirror. "By the time she's 12, the whole chess world will know her name." "I know." Elena's voice was complicated. "I keep thinking about what Belinsky said, that our job is to make sure chess doesn't take everything from her. What do you need to protect her?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her words were measured, careful. "I need you to be consistent, not just now when everything is new and exciting, but in 5 years, in 10 years, when she's a teenager who doesn't want to practice, or when she loses a crucial game and wants to quit. I need you to be there for the hard parts, not just the triumphs." "I will be." "You left Sarah when things got hard. You walked away from your own son because acknowledging him would have been inconvenient." Eleanor's tone wasn't accusatory, just factual. "I need to know that's not who you are anymore." Marcus absorbed her words. He could make promises, offer reassurances, but Elena had seen too much betrayal to trust words alone. She needed evidence accumulated over years, proof demonstrated through action. "I can't change what I did," he said finally, "but I can tell you why I did it if you want to understand." "Tell me." So he did. He told her about his father, Charles Whitmore, who believed that love was weakness and sentiment was for the poor, about the beatings Marcus received whenever he showed emotion, the isolation whenever he formed attachments outside their social class, about the ultimatum that forced him to choose between Sarah and his inheritance, and the terror he felt at the prospect of facing the world without his family's money and connections. "I was 23, he said. "I had never worked a real job, never paid my own rent, never made a decision that didn't have my father's approval as its horizon. When he told me to choose, I was afraid, and I chose wrong. That's not an excuse, no, but it's an explanation, and I've spent the last 12 years trying to become someone my father would despise, someone who thinks love matters more than ledgers. It's slow work. I'm not done." He met her eyes in the mirror. "But I'm not stopping either." Elena watched him for a long moment, weighing his words against his actions, his promises against his history. Finally she nodded, a small gesture, but Marcus understood its weight. "Lily's birthday is in March," she said. "She'll be 8. She wants a party at the Knight's Gambit. I'll make it happen, and she wants you there. Not as a guest, as family." Marcus's throat tightened. "I'll be there." In the back seat, Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Are we home?" "Almost, sweetheart." Elena smoothed her daughter's hair. "Go back to sleep." But Lily had noticed Marcus watching them in the mirror. "Grandpa, did I do okay today?" "You did better than okay." "You were magnificent," Lily smiled, a drowsy expression that somehow managed to be both innocent and knowing. "Grandma Sarah would have been proud." "I think she would have," Marcus agreed, his voice rough. "I think she would have been proud of all of us." The car pulled up to the building's entrance, and Marcus helped Elena carry the sleeping Lily down to their basement room. A journey he made now without hesitation, the servants' corridors as familiar to him as his own penthouse. He waited while Elena tucked her daughter into bed, the trophy placed carefully on the nightstand, where Lily could see it when she woke. "Same time Saturday?" Marcus asked at the door. "Same time Saturday," Elena confirmed. And for the first time since they had met, she smiled at him. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Elena." He took the elevator back to his penthouse, to his empty rooms and expensive silence. But for the first time in years, the emptiness didn't feel crushing. It felt like space, space that could be filled, given time and patience, and the slow accumulation of moments that mattered. He sat down at his chessboard, set up the pieces, and began to study. The months that followed were a gradual transformation, visible not in dramatic gestures, but in the accumulation of small, consistent choices. Marcus attended every one of Lily's tournaments, sitting in the spectator section with Elena, learning to read the games well enough to understand when his granddaughter was winning and when she was merely pretending to struggle. He hosted Sunday dinners in his penthouse, learning to cook from YouTube videos because ordering catered meals felt too impersonal. He moved Elena and Lily out of the basement and into a proper apartment on the building's 4th floor. Not the penthouse, Elena insisted, because Lily needed to grow up understanding that money wasn't the measure of a person's worth. The chess world began to take notice. Lily won the New York State Championship in her age division, then the regional, then qualified for the National Elementary Championship that would be held in Dallas in May. Chess magazines requested interviews, websites wrote profiles. Other Prodigy's parents asked Elena for advice on nurturing their own children's talents. Through it all, Lily remained remarkably grounded. She still chased pigeons in Central Park, still laughed at silly jokes, still insisted that Marcus play at least one game against her every Saturday, even though she won every time. "You're getting better," she told him after one such game, surveying the board where his king had finally been cornered. "You lasted 32 moves. Last month, it was only 24. High praise from the future world champion." "I'm not world champion yet." Lily began resetting the pieces with practiced ease. "Grandmaster Belinsky says I need to work on my endgames and my temperament. He says I get impatient when the game goes long." "That sounds like something you could fix." "Maybe." She looked up at him with those dark, knowing eyes. "Grandpa, can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you leave Grandma Sarah when she was going to have Daddy?" The question, so simply asked, struck Marcus like a physical blow. He had known it would come eventually, had prepared various explanations, various framings of the truth, but none of his rehearsed answers felt adequate now. "I was scared," he said finally. "My father told me I had to choose between his money and the woman I loved, and I was too afraid to face the world without his protection." "But you were a grown-up." "Grown-ups get scared too. Sometimes they make bad choices because they're afraid." Lily considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "Were you scared of Daddy? Of being his dad?" "Maybe. A little." Marcus felt the words coming from somewhere deep, a place he had kept locked for decades. "I think I was scared of not being good enough, of failing him the way my father failed me." "So you didn't try at all?" "That was my biggest mistake. I thought that if I didn't try, I couldn't fail. But not trying is its own kind of failure." He met her gaze. "Do you understand?" "I think so." Lily moved a pawn forward, beginning a new game without waiting for his agreement. "You were scared of making mistakes, so you made the biggest mistake of all." "Exactly. That's dumb." And despite the weight of the conversation, Marcus felt a smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, it was very dumb. Don't be dumb anymore, okay? Mama says you're doing better, and I like having a grandpa. I'll try my best." "Good." She captured his pawn with a move he should have seen coming. "Your turn." Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, and with it came preparations for the national championship in Dallas. Lily would be competing against 83 of the best young chess players in the country, including several who had been training with grandmasters since before they could read. Elena was simultaneously excited and terrified. Marcus found himself making lists of contingencies, backup plans, worst-case scenarios. "She's going to be fine," Grandmaster Belinsky assured them during the final pre-tournament session. "She has the talent. More importantly, she has the temperament. She plays each game like it matters but doesn't carry losses into the next round." "What about the pressure?" Elena asked. "All those people watching, the expectations." "Lily doesn't play for other people's expectations. She plays because she loves the game." Belinsky smiled, a rare expression that transformed his usually stern features. "That's the difference between good players and great ones. Good players want to win. Great players want to understand." The flight to Dallas was Lily's first time on an airplane. She pressed her face to the window during takeoff, watching New York shrink beneath them with undisguised wonder. Marcus had booked 3 seats in first class, a concession to comfort that Elena allowed only because she was too nervous to argue, and spent the flight reviewing Lily's most recent games on his tablet, while his granddaughter asked an endless stream of questions about clouds, air pressure, and the physics of flight. "Grandpa, did you know that planes can't fly backward? The wings only work one way." "I did not know that. And the oxygen masks drop down if the pressure changes, but you're supposed to put on your own mask before helping anyone else. Why do you think they say that? Because you can't help someone else if you can't breathe yourself." Lily considered this with her characteristic intensity. "That's like chess. You have to protect your own king before you can attack the other one." "I hadn't thought of it that way. But you're right." The tournament venue was a massive convention center, transformed for the occasion into a chess cathedral. 200 boards arranged in precise rows, each one a potential battlefield. Giant screens displaying games in progress. A hushed atmosphere that reminded Marcus of libraries and churches. Lily surveyed the scene with calm assessment. Already calculating, already planning. "There are a lot of kids here," she observed. 83 competitors, Marcus confirmed. "You'll play 7 rounds over 3 days, with your final standing determined by total points." "I know how Swiss system tournaments work, Grandpa." "Of course you do. I'm the one who needs reminding." The first day of competition established Lily as a contender. She won her opening game in 34 moves against a boy from California who had been playing competitively for 6 years. Her second game went longer, 51 moves against a methodical girl from Chicago who refused to make mistakes, but ended with another victory. By the dinner break, she was one of 12 players with perfect scores, and the chess community's whisper network was already buzzing with her name. "You're doing great," Elena told her daughter over room service pasta. "How do you feel?" "Hungry." Lily stabbed at her spaghetti with evident appetite, "and a little tired. The games take a lot of concentration. Do you want to stop? We can withdraw if it's too much." "Mama." Lily's tone carried the exasperated patience of a child addressing an unreasonable adult. "I'm fine. This is fun." "Fun?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You just spent 6 hours locked in mental combat with extremely intelligent opponents." "Dude, that's why it's fun." Lily grinned, and for a moment she looked exactly like the 7-year-old she was supposed to be. Not a prodigy, not a chess machine, just a kid who loved playing games. "Tomorrow's going to be harder. The other players with perfect scores are really good. Do you have a strategy? Play good moves. Don't make mistakes." She shrugged. "That's all you can really do." Day 2 brought the challenges Lily had predicted. Her third-round opponent was a 10-year-old named Gabriel, who had been studying with a former world champion since age 5. The game lasted 73 moves and required every ounce of Lily's concentration. She won, but the victory left her drained, needing a 30-minute nap before her 4th-round game. That game, against a girl named Maid from Seattle, went badly from the start. Maid played an aggressive opening that Lily had never encountered, putting her on the defensive early. By move 20, Lily's position was cramped. By move 30, she was behind material. By move 42, she resigned, her first loss of the tournament. Marcus watched his granddaughter shake May's hand with genuine grace, then walk calmly to the designated player area. Only when she was out of view of the other competitors did her composure crack. She sat down on a bench, buried her face in her hands, and began to cry. "Hey!" Marcus sat beside her, keeping his voice low. "It's okay. One loss doesn't end the tournament." "I know." Lily's voice was muffled by her palms. "I'm not sad about losing. I'm sad because I played badly. I saw the right moves, but I didn't trust myself to make them." "What do you mean?" "When she played that opening, I felt scared. I didn't understand it, and instead of taking time to figure it out, I made safe moves. Moves that felt comfortable, but weren't actually good. She looked up at him, tears tracking down her cheeks. Daddy used to say that fear makes you play small, and I played small. The echo of Michael's wisdom, reaching through his daughter to his father, sent a familiar ache through Marcus's chest. What would your father say to do now? He would say to feel the feeling, then let it go. Don't carry it into the next game. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He would say that mistakes are just lessons in disguise. He sounds very wise. He was. A small, wobbly smile. He would have liked you, I think, once you stopped being scared. They sat together for a few more minutes, grandfather and granddaughter, while the tournament continued around them. Eleanor found them there, her face tight with worry, until she saw Lily's expression beginning to settle. "Ready for round 5?" Eleanor asked. Lily stood, squared her shoulders, and nodded. Ready. The 5th round game was against another player with one loss, a boy named David from Texas who played with ferocious aggression. But Lily, having confronted her fear in the previous game, responded with a clarity that surprised even her coaches. She met aggression with precision, turned David's attacks against him, and won in 41 moves. "That was the best game I've seen you play," Grandmaster Belinsky told her afterward, having watched via live stream from New York. "You played like you had nothing to fear." "I don't," Lily said simply. "Not anymore." The final day of the tournament began with Lily in 6th place, 2 wins behind the leaders but with a strong tie-break score. To have any chance at the championship, she would need to win her remaining 2 games and hope that the leaders drew or lost against each other. "Don't think about standings," Elena advised her over breakfast. "Just play your best." "I know, Mama." Lily was calm, centered, a miniature Zen master in pigtails. "What happens, happens. I can only control my own moves." Round 6 paired her against one of the leaders, a 9-year-old named James, who had won national championships in 2 different age divisions. He was famous for his tactical brilliance, his ability to create complications that overwhelmed opponents. But Lily had studied his games with Belinsky, and she had a plan. The game began quietly, both players maneuvering for position in a closed opening. For the first 20 moves, the board felt almost peaceful. Pieces developed, pawns advanced, no direct confrontation. But on move 21, James launched the attack everyone had been waiting for, sacrificing a pawn to open lines toward Lily's king. What followed was the most complex chess Marcus had ever witnessed. Pieces flew across the board, sacrifices created counter-sacrifices, threats multiplied faster than he could track. Lily sat motionless, her dark eyes fixed on the position, while James fidgeted and checked his clock and ran his hands through his hair. Move 47. Lily had 3 minutes left on her clock. James had 7. The position was balanced on a knife's edge, one wrong move away from disaster for either player. Marcus held his breath. Lily reached for her rook, held it for a moment, then placed it on a square that seemed to Marcus completely irrelevant to the kingside battle. Several spectators gasped. James stared at the board with visible confusion. Then, slowly, the gasps turned to murmurs of appreciation. Lily's rook move had created a subtle threat, so subtle that most observers, including James, needed nearly a minute to see it. If James continued his attack, Lily's rook would sweep down and deliver checkmate. But if James stopped to address the threat, his attack would lose momentum and Lily's superior position would gradually convert to victory. James spent 4 of his remaining 7 minutes trying to find a way out. There wasn't one. On move 53, he resigned and shook Lily's hand with an expression that mixed respect with frustration. "Incredible game," he said. "I never saw the rook move coming." "Thank you for the game," Lily replied, formal and gracious. You're a very strong player. The final round began 2 hours later. Lily was now tied for second place, half a point behind a boy named Peter, who had also won his 6th round game. If Lily won and Peter drew or lost, she would be national champion. If Peter won, he would clinch the title regardless of Lily's result. "Don't watch Peter's game," Elena warned Marcus. "Focus on Lily." "I know." But his eyes kept drifting to the board 3 rows over, where Peter was playing against May, the same girl who had defeated Lily in round 4. Lily's final opponent was a girl named Sophia, steady and reliable, but without the tactical fireworks of James or the defensive solidity of May. The game began in Lily's favor and stayed there, her advantage growing move by move as Sophia searched desperately for counterplay that never materialized. On move 38, Sophia resigned. Lily had done everything she could. Now the championship depended on Peter's game. Marcus finally allowed himself to look. Peter's position was worse than it had been 10 moves ago. May had built a powerful attack and was closing in on his king. The boy's face was pale, his hands trembling as he reached for pieces. Move 41, move 42. On move 43, Peter made a mistake, a small one but enough. May pounced, and 3 moves later, Peter's king was checkmated. The tournament director's announcement echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new national elementary chess champion. With a final score of 6 wins and 1 loss, Lily Chen Whitmore." The applause was thunderous. Lily stood frozen for a moment, her expression stunned, before Elena swept her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, other players and parents offered congratulations. But Lily's eyes found Marcus in the crowd. She broke away from her mother, ran across the playing hall, and threw herself into his arms. "We did it, Grandpa," she whispered. "We did it." Marcus held his granddaughter as the world celebrated around them, tears streaming down his face. "No," he managed. "You did it. You did it all yourself. But you were here." She pulled back to look at him, her face bright with joy. "You showed up. That's what matters." They had planned a quiet celebration, dinner at a nice restaurant, maybe a movie, an early night before the flight home. But the chess community had other ideas. By the time they reached the hotel lobby, a crowd of well-wishers had gathered. Coaches, players, parents, reporters, all wanting a piece of the 7-year-old who had just made history. "Youngest national champion in 43 years, one reporter said, thrusting a microphone toward Lily. "How does it feel?" "It feels good." Lily's voice was calm, poised, utterly unfazed by the attention. "I played my best, and it was enough." "What's next? The World Youth Championship?" "Maybe. First, I want to go home and practice. Grandmaster Belinsky says I still need to work on my endgames." The reporter laughed, charmed by her matter-of-fact response. "Your grandfather must be proud. Mr. Whitmore, any comments?" Marcus felt the question like a trap. For decades, he had cultivated a public image, the successful businessman, the society fixture, the man who had everything. None of that seemed relevant now, standing beside his granddaughter in the glow of her achievement. "I'm not just proud," he said finally. "I'm grateful that she gave me a second chance to be part of her life. Grateful that she taught me what matters. Grateful that—" His voice cracked, and he had to pause to collect himself. "Grateful that I finally stopped being scared." The reporter's expression shifted from professional interest to something more genuine. "That's quite a statement. It's quite a story." Marcus put his arm around Lily's shoulders. "Maybe someday we'll tell the whole thing, but right now we're going to celebrate as a family." They escaped to a private room the hotel had arranged, away from the cameras and questions. Elena ordered champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Lily. Marcus pulled out the gift he had been hiding since they left New York, a leather-bound chess journal hand-tooled with Lily's name on the cover. "For recording your games," he explained. All the great players keep journals. They write down their thoughts, their analysis, their insights. Someday when you're world champion, you can look back and see how far you've come. Lily traced her name with one finger, her expression reverent. It's beautiful. Open it. Inside the front cover was an inscription in Marcus's careful handwriting. To Lily. Your grandmother Sarah used to say that chess teaches us about consequences. Every move changes the board forever, and you can't take it back. But she also said something else, something I didn't understand until I met you. The board doesn't care about yesterday's games. It only cares about the moves you make right now. You helped me understand that second chances aren't about erasing the past. They're about choosing, move by move, to become someone worth forgiving. I love you, champion. Grandpa Marcus Lily read the inscription twice, her lips moving silently. Then she looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes, the first time he had seen her cry from joy rather than frustration. I love you too, Grandpa. She threw her arms around him. Thank you for showing up. Elena watched them embrace, her own eyes glistening. Sarah would have loved this, she said softly. Seeing you both together, seeing how far we've all come. I wish I could have told her I'm sorry. Marcus's voice was rough. In person, before it was too late. I think she knows. Elena's tone held a certainty that went beyond mere comfort. Wherever she is, I think she knows. They toasted to Lily's victory, to Sarah's memory, to the strange and winding path that had brought them together. The champagne was expensive, and the cider was sweet, and the moment felt like something worth preserving. A photograph of the soul, to be taken out and examined in future years, when memory needed refreshing. At 9:47 p.m., Lily fell asleep on the hotel room couch, the chess journal clutched to her chest like a teddy bear. Marcus lifted her carefully, carried her to her bed, and tucked her in with a tenderness he was still learning to express. She has your eyes, you know. Elena had appeared beside him, watching her daughter sleep. Sarah's eyes. I saw photos, and it's unmistakable. The same eyes that beat me at chess 17 times before I managed to win once. She let you win that one, Michael told me. Elena smiled at his expression. She wanted you to feel successful. She thought it might help you see that you didn't need your father's approval to be worthwhile. Marcus absorbed this revelation, another gift from the dead, another insight into the woman he had failed. She was always teaching me things. I was just too young and stupid to learn. Maybe, or maybe you weren't ready yet. Elena touched his arm gently. Some lessons can only be learned at the right time. Some second chances only come when you're finally able to receive them. They stood together in the darkness, watching Lily sleep, watching the steady rise and fall of her breath. Outside, Dallas glittered with a million lights, but inside this room, everything had narrowed to the essentials. Family, forgiveness, the quiet miracle of being present for the people who mattered. Thank you, Marcus said finally, for letting me be part of this, for not destroying me when you had every right to. I thought about it. Elena's voice was honest. There were nights when I fantasized about watching your world crumble, but then Lily would ask about her grandfather, and I would remember what Michael believed, that people deserve chances to change, even when they don't deserve it. He was a better person than I am. He was, but you're trying to become better. That counts for something. Does it count for enough? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that felt like decision. Ask me in 10 years. Keep showing up. Keep being the grandfather Lily deserves. She met his gaze in the dim light. If you can do that, then yes, it counts for everything. Marcus nodded, accepting the terms of his redemption. 10 years of showing up, 10 years of moves made carefully, consistently, with the board always in mind. It seemed like an eternity and an instant all at once. But as he watched his granddaughter sleep, clutching the journal that held his words, he realized something that felt like revelation. He was no longer afraid. The fear that had driven him to abandon Sarah, to deny Michael, to hide behind money and status and careful cruelty, that fear had finally loosened its grip. In its place was something he barely recognized: hope. Not the desperate hope of the drowning, grasping for any rescue, but the steady hope of someone who had finally found solid ground. The chessboard of his life had been reset. The pieces stood in their starting positions. And for the first time in 35 years, Marcus Whitmore was ready to play.